Baby on Board by inkinmyheartandonthepage. Whoa, Peter Stark breathed, looking around with awe. Tony Stark had a tight grip on his son as he piggybacked him through the corridor of Fury's helicarrier. It was an impressive engineering feat even Tony was in awe of. Tony would have liked to seen it take off, but he had been a little late to that party. Instead, he had been busy reading up on Nick Fury's proposal the group he had was gathering for today. Mr. Stark? Tony looked up as Phil Coulson came towards him, a small smile on his face. Now that Tony wasn't acting like an insecure teenager, he had come to like Phil. As he approached, Tony caught the flicker of surprise on his face when he looked at Peter on his back. The surprise was gone in an instant, the smile back in place. "I'm glad you were both able to join us," Phil continued smoothly as he came to a stop in front of Tony. He held out his hand and Tony released his grip on Peter's leg to shake it. He didn't have to worry about Peter falling. He could feel his son using his sticking power to hold on tight. "Well, I had no choice when Peter heard Dr. Banner would be on board," Tony joked, giving Peter a small bounce as he released Phil's hand. "Peter, say hi to Coulson." "Hi," Peter chirped, smiling easily at Phil over Tony's shoulder and have a little wave. "Is Dr. Banner really on board?" Phil gave a small chuckle and Tony could see that he was swayed by Peter's charm, as many often were. "He really is. I can introduce you if you'd like." "Yes, please," Peter gasped, feet kicking out in his excitement. "Follow me then," Phil said, turning and gesturing in the direction they were to walk. Tony fell into step with Phil, Peter practically vibrating against his back. At 7 years old, Peter really should have been at school, but after Pepper had left with Phil last night and Tony had stayed up reviewing the files he had been left with, Peter had snuck out of bed. "What's that?" Peter had asked, making Tony nearly jump out of his skin. He had whirled around and frowned down at his pyjama-clad son. "What are you doing awake?" "I got thirsty," Peter had shrugged. He had moved closer to Tony until Tony had been able to sweep him up into his lap. Peter had stared at the holographs, eyes wide as he had steeled his back against Tony's chest. "Is that Dr. Banner?" And Peter had pointed to one of the screens. "Sure is," Tony had said, smoothing a hand over Peter's curls. "Tomorrow I'm going to meet him." Peter had gasped and begged to come. Normally Tony would have left Peter in Pepper or Happy's care when he was out on Iron Man business. He never wanted to put his son in danger because of him. But as Tony watched the screen playing out the videos they had on a unique group of individuals, he made the decision to take Peter with him. Something big was coming and Tony wanted Peter by his side when it did. He didn't want anyone getting a hold of his son, not after what happened the last time. Phil finally led them into the main control room. Tony felt Peter perk up at the sound of voices. "I think it's about the mechanics," Bruce Banner was saying. "Iridium. What do they need iridium for?" "It's a stabilising agent," Tony answered for them as they strode into the room confidently. "It means the portal won't collapse on itself like it did at S.H.I.E.L.D. He moved towards Thor, Peter openly gaping as he did. "No hard feelings, Point Break. You've got a mean swing." He moved past Thor, moving down towards the control pad. "Also," Tony continued, despite the way everyone was openly gaping at him, "it means the portal can open as wide and stay open as long as Loki likes." He stopped at the control panel and looked around. It was quite the setup, but Tony wasn't looking at all the gadgets. He was looking for the perfect spot to place a bug. "Raise the mizzenmast, jib the topsails." Peter giggled into his neck and Tony smirked. "That man is playing Gallagher," Tony declared loudly, making Peter gasp. He felt Peter look over his shoulder towards one of the crew. "Thought we wouldn't notice, but we did." "Can I play?" Peter asked. "No, we have science to do," Tony said, and he felt Peter settle back down. Tony raised one hand to cover his eye, frowning. "How does Fury even see these?" "He turns," Maria Hill said dryly. "Sounds exhausting," Tony said to Peter. He moved to one of the displays, pressing the screen, Peter peering over his shoulder intently. Louder, he continued. The rest of the raw materials Agent Barton can get his hands on pretty easily. The only major component he still needs is... He trailed off, giving Peter's leg a little tap. Sue him, he wanted to show off his smart son. A power source, Peter said excitedly, of high energy density. Correct. Tony beamed and carefully slipped a bug under the monitor. He turned to face the group that was still watching him. Something to kickstart the cube, right, Peter? Right, Peter cheered. God, Tony loved his little genius. When did you become an expert in thermonuclear astrophysics? Maria asked, arms crossed against her chest. Last night, Tony snarked back. Didn't we, Peter? Uh-huh. Peter gave Maria a toothy smile. It was fun. The packet, Tony explained at Maria's dubious look. Selvig's notes, the extraction theory papers. Am I the only one who did the readings? Does Loki need any particular kind of power source? Steve Rogers asked, eyes darting between Tony and Peter, who was still clinging to his back, a frown pulling at his features. It was like Steve didn't know which issue was more pressing, Loki or the child clinging to Tony's back. He would have to heat the cube to 120 million Kelvin just to break down the Coulomb barrier, Bruce said as he paced up and down. Dad, Peter breathed in his ear. It's Dr. Banner. Tony patted his son's leg as he moved closer to Dr. Banner. Unless Selvig has figured out how to stabilise the quantum tunnelling effect. Well, if he could do that, he could achieve heavy ion fusion, Bruce said, an excited gleam in his eyes as he drew closer to Tony. A tiny reactor on the planet. Finally, someone who speaks English, Tony joked. Is that what just happened? Steve muttered. Good to meet you, Dr. Banner, Tony said, reaching out to shake Bruce's hand. Your work on anti-electron collision is unparalleled. It is so cool, Peter agreed breathlessly. And we're a huge fan of the way you lose control and turn into an enormous green rage monster. Bruce pressed his lips together and after a beat said, Thanks. Dr. Banner is only here to track the cube, Nick Fury said as he strode into the room. I was hoping you might join him. He looked to Tony, brow lifting high. Who is that? Don't tell me you forgot about my assistant, Tony quipped, settling Peter higher on his back. He goes with me everywhere. He gave Fury a firm look, daring him to say otherwise. Hi, Peter waved. I like your helicarrier. Fury gave Tony a single nod. Thanks. As Fury started to speak again, Tony turned his head and whispered to Peter. You remember what you got to do, kiddo? Yep, Peter whispered back. Listen, stay close, don't touch anything that glows. If anything happens, find a safe space and web up anything that comes near me. That's my boy, Tony grinned. I won't let anything happen to you. I know, Peter said, pressing his cheek into Tony's neck. They don't want me here, I can hear them. I want you here, Tony said, and that's all that matters. I did, Steve said. I understood that reference. Tony rolled his eyes as he was dragged back into the conversation around them. Shall we play, Doctor? This way, sir, Bruce said, gesturing to a corridor. As they headed down the corridor, Bruce turned to look at Tony. So, you brought your assistant? This is Peter, Tony introduced. He's a big fan of yours. You're my favourite scientist, Peter gasped at Bruce. You're so cool. Thank you, Bruce stammered. It's nice to meet you, Peter. Can I have your autograph? Peter pleaded. Tony smothered his laughter at Bruce's scared look. He has a collection going. I'd love to, Bruce said, offering Peter a smile. Yes! Peter cheered. Peter! Tony yelled at the top of his lungs as he ran through the damaged helicarrier. It was safely on the ground now, but adrenaline and fear were still pounding through his body. He had left Peter in the lab where they had been working, telling his son to find somewhere safe to hide. Steve was right on his heels as he ran, calling out Peter's name too. They skidded into the lab, which was now a broken mess, and Tony looked around frantically. "Peter!" Tony yelled, shoes crunching under broken glass as he whirled around, searching the wreckage. "Kiddo, where are you?" "Here." Peter's voice came from above him. Tony sucked in a deep breath as Peter propelled down from the ceiling on a single web, swaying slightly as he did. He paused in front of Tony, curls dangling as he swayed upside down. "That was loud," Peter said. Tony let out a whoosh, scooping his son out from the air and cradling him close to his body. He pressed kiss after kiss to Peter's face, breathing in his scent. "You're okay," Tony breathed. "I webbed myself up like you said to," Peter said, voice shaking slightly. "Dad, that was a really bumpy ride." Tony let out a choked laugh. "You're telling me. You okay? Are you hurt?" "I'm okay," Peter said. "Worth all this to meet Dr. Banner?" Tony asked, shifting Peter in his arms so his legs could wrap around Tony's waist. "Totally," Peter breathed, hugging Tony around the neck. "He turned into the Hulk." "Yes, he did." Tony let out a breath. He turned to find Steve watching them, expression stunned. "Let's get you out of here." "How did he do that?" Steve asked, looking to the web that was still hanging from the ceiling. "A story for another day," Tony said curtly. "Come on, Peter, time to visit your Aunt May while I save the world." "Okay," Peter agreed easily. "I think I need a nap." Tony chuckled as he carried Peter out of the room. "Tony?" Steve called. Tony paused, holding Peter tightly. "I'm sorry," Steve said. Tony knew what he was apologising for misjudging him, for thinking the worst about him. "Come on, Steve," Tony said, turning to look at the soldier. "The world isn't going to save itself, and Peter needs a nap." Tony needed a nap too, but first he had to stop Loki and save the world so that Peter could grow up and live a long, full life. Thank you for listening. I really hope you enjoyed. This author is one that I have been reading for years, and I'm so flattered that they agreed to let me record this podfic of their work. Thank you. I hope you have a great day.